Next, from the state capitol, the Senate Executive Committee hears testimony on Senate Bill 2404, the pension reform bill sponsored by Senate President Sen Cullerton. This bill is one of two competing bills to reform the state's pension systems. The other bill, SB-1, which is sponsored by House Speaker Michael Madigan, has already passed the House. This runs about 40 minutes.
Projections, we'll have an extra $850 million for fiscal year 15. Now keep in mind, the education budget's been cut for, I think, 5 years straight, and the governor's budget proposal for 14 cuts it again. We would have $850 million available, a portion of which certainly would go to education. So, you know, if the retirees are not thinking about that, certainly the actives are. The actives are thinking, hey, next year we won't have these big cuts that we've been suffering from for the last 5 years, which will benefit them. So I just wanted to put it in perspective. Keep in mind also that, you know, people forget we passed a two-tier system. So for the last 2 years, all the new teachers, all the new state employees have been working under a system where the retirement age was increased to 67. There's no more 3% annual cost of living adjustments. They have to calculate their benefits over an 8-year period. That bill alone saved us $71 billion over that same period of time. Now we add another 47. So we have really stepped up if we can pass a bill like this over the last couple of years to address this concern and to address the crowding out of our budget.
So your perception is that we don't really have to do anything more and everything's going to be fine?
No. I don't think there's much more room, given the Constitution, that I believe makes it very difficult to just unilaterally reduce benefits. This is a very clever way to address that Constitution by keeping it within a contractual. There's only so much money you can save in these three choices. If everybody says, I'm not going to give up my compounded COLA, the only savings you get is freezing their pay and not making it pensionable and taking away their health care. So you're restrained in how much you can save under this model. But this model is the one that's constitutional. So, you know, if we unilaterally do it and the court throws it out, not only have we not saved any money, we've lost another year, which is another $1 billion. In fiscal year 15, instead of having $850 million more, will be $1 billion less.
You know, I've had a hard time. I try to ask any lawyer I run into whether they think these things we're doing are they constitutional, and whether there's really much difference between the two approaches. It seems like about half of them say they're constitutional and half say they're not, and I guess I just wonder. Are there more people saying that your particular plan is more constitutional? Is that just your opinion? Or
I'm not very objective here, but we've had on our Senate Democratic website a 77-page law review article.
I've seen that.
That
yes,
goes into depth into what was in the mind of the folks that voted for the pension clause in the Illinois Constitution. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, if you read that, I bet you the only 50% that said that they think both of them are the same, they didn't read that. So this is much stronger. Now, as I said before, anybody can sue, but the fact that these unions are not going to sue is very significant. They're not going to file amicus briefs asking the court to throw it out. Anybody can sue. I'm not on the Supreme Court. I'm not saying that I know exactly what the court's going to do, but a much stronger argument can be made for the constitutionality of this approach, because it's taking the very plain words of the Constitution and acknowledging it and then working around it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I understand that that retired teachers may sue or have already said they will. Is that?
We spent some time with them today going over their legal theories, and you know, maybe they might sue. That's up to them to decide. That would be, you know, just that's only a part of this bill, right? So not the actives, just the retirees, just the teachers. They have their own legal theories. I can't stop anybody from suing. But clearly, this is a stronger argument for the constitutionality than the other versions that are out there.
Please add Senator Lightford to the roll. WLS-TV requests permission to videotape the proceedings. Seeing no objection, leave is granted. Are there further questions for this panel? Senator Ryder? Yes, you may. Senator Ryder.
Senator Cullerton, I did read, there are at least some people who could sue one or more of the boards, but it's not anyone. Under the bill,
Okay.
it says that after the 21st day, on the 21st day after filing the request with the Secretary of the State, then any Tier 1 employee or Tier 1 retiree who made an election under paragraph 1 of subsection A or A5 of section 2-110.3.
Right, the ones that took the deal, Senator. The ones that took the deal can
So you're
sue.
affording the right to the people who took the deal.
Because it's part of their consideration to get the funding guarantee. That's the theory.
Okay, is that part of your,
You only need one to file a lawsuit. There'll be,
okay, if I could finish.
you and I are on the same page on this. We want to make sure they have a solid ability to sue.
You're talking about different things.
Oh, I don't think so.
Well,
I'm talking about the lawsuit against the systems. Is that what you understand my question to be?
But his earlier point was suing on the constitutionality.
Not when he and I were talking. I understand. When he
I
was
thought you
Senator
were
Luttrell,
following-
I was
We're
not
talking
addressing
about,
Senator
we're talking about
Luttrell.
the
following
funding
Senator
guarantee. We're
Yeah,
talking about the
the funding
funding
guarantee,
guarantee.
correct.
We're affording the opportunity for the hundreds of thousands of people who've taken the deal to file a lawsuit to compel the retirement system to sue. And I think we also make it a fiduciary obligation of the.
Well, the fiduciary obligation doesn't mean anything unless someone's there to enforce it. But
Oh, now you, okay, Senator.
no,
If- any way you want me to draft that
I've always,
provision.
well, I've got an idea for you.
Good. If, I really want to get you to vote for the bill, though. So if we're going to engage in this,
Okay.
I'm open to it.
How about this? How about if the General Assembly of the Governor short the payments as determined by the actuary, then the members' contributions are reduced by the same percentage. If you put that on the bill, I'll vote for it.
Okay.
I've got an amendment being drafted right now. If you put it on the bill, I'll vote for it.
We'll look at it. Okay.
You'll look at it.
Well,
Okay, fair enough.
Other questions for this panel? Really quickly, we're about to hear from the Illinois Retired Teachers Association in opposition. Is the Retired Teachers Association affiliated with either of your organizations, formally or informally? No?
No. Thank you.
Mr. Pinkerton, are you ready to testify? And Mr. Stevens, if we could have you return to the witness table. Senator Ryder would like to recall you, and I wouldn't be surprised if the opponent's testimony leads to additional questions for you as well. Mr.
Thank you.
Pinkerton? Oh, there you are. Welcome to the Executive Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Oh, do you wanna
We're
let
going to
him-
hear from the
okay.
opponent. Yes.
Hello, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Bob Pinkerton. I'm the Vice President of the Illinois Retired Teachers Association. I'm here to represent 35,000 men and women who have retired from one of the most honorable careers imaginable. I'm here today to register the Illinois Retired Teachers Association's opposition to Senate Bill 2404. I understand the bill has been painstakingly crafted with the hope it will pass constitutional muster. To his credit, President Cullerton has worked diligently with working men and women in an attempt to arrive at a compromise. To be sure, Senator Cullerton's legislation represents a willingness to include workers and retirees in this process. I met with the President today, and we were able to have a very good conversation. Despite all of this, I'd like to be clear. The IRTA was not part of the discussions that led to this bill. The IRTA believes that this legislation diminishes the state's responsibility to a contract to which we fulfill our part in its entirety. The IRTA believes that this diminishment does not come with any choice that is beneficial to its membership. That's why we stand in opposition today. And thank you for your opportunity to testify today.
Thank you. Questions for the opponent? Senator Murphy?
So is it your organization intention to sue if this bill gets signed into law?
We would hope that it would not come to that, but we would reserve the right to do so if it appears we need to.
Do you have a legal defense fund in place for such an event?
Yes, we do.
How much money's in it?
I don't know the exact figure, but probably a little over $100,000 in that particular fund.
Well, you know, I mean, it depends if it's out of session, in session. You anticipate, if in fact your organization chose to proceed with the suit, that you would have the resources necessary to litigate that through the Supreme Court?
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Raul.
And following up on Senator Murphy's line of questioning, and what would you foresee your grounds to your suit with?
We secured a legal opinion some time ago from a firm in Chicago. It is their indication to us that aspects of this bill are unconstitutional, despite the choice that's involved. As Senator Luchtenfeld said, there are probably other attorneys that are going to have a different point of view, but ours has led us to believe that, and at this point, that's our opinion.
Other than just a broad statement that it's unconstitutional, did you say anything more specifically about why it's unconstitutional?
I don't think I'm qualified to make that detailed comment. I'm not an attorney.
I would like to follow up on that question with one that perhaps you could respond to even without being an attorney. What constitutionally protected benefit do you believe is diminished or impaired by this bill?
If one choice is taken, you give up a couple of years of your on the other choice, realizing you're giving up insurance, and the argument can be made that it's not protected. But people need to remember that back prior to 95, might be wrong on that date, TRS actually provided support for our insurance. So there is a history of that being provided. Plus, it is our opinion that a choice where it's kind of like either jump off the cliff or I'll shoot you is not really a very good choice.
You said an argument can be made that health care benefits are constitutionally protected.
I'm saying, yes, I'm saying that we think it's possible that a case can be made that way, particularly people that were older retirees, because at one point TRS provided insurance for those people. Granted, they still paid premiums, but TRS paid part of that. And so they have retired with that being part of TRS.
All right. Seeing no further, Senator Hunter is called somewhere else, I understand. So if there's no objection, Senator Hunter moves to recommend do pass Senate Bill 2404. If there's no objection, the roll is open, and Senator Hunter seeks leave to be recorded as voting aye. There's no objection, you'll be so recorded. Senator Claiborne and then Senator Raul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions. One is, you're familiar with the other proposals that have been presented,
You talking about Senate Bill 1 amended?
right? And there was also Senator Biss's bill as well.
Yes.
And,
Not in detail, but yes.
Okay.
Could you pull that microphone a little bit closer to your mouth, Mr. Pickett? Thank
Sorry.
you.
And what was your opinion on those bills?
If there was such a thing as a degree of unconstitutionality, I think they are much more unconstitutional than this one.
Okay.
The problem is there a degree of unconstitutionality? I think it either is or it isn't.
Okay. Second question is, have you or your organization presented any kind of pension reform or anything as it relates to this solution?
No, we have not.
Is there a reason?
Well, we don't really have a stake in the game anymore as far as being players in the field. We've completed our part of the contract. We're sort of out of the game, and we're at the mercy of the constitutional protection. We have nothing to negotiate. So maybe that's why we weren't invited to be at the table. But
Well, if you haven't presented anything and you're taking the position that you don't have to, that seems kind of odd that you would expect to be at the table. I guess you do, in my opinion, you do have a stake in it. and the stake is to make sure that your members of your organization continue to receive a check.
Well, I understand
Do
that.
you believe that?
Absolutely. But my point was that we're in a different position than actives, and they still have a career ahead of them. We don't.
But now, to be honest, because when I came in here in 1995, we instituted or passed a bill that created the retired teachers' health insurance.
Yes, that's true.
And as you understand that, a lot of them who had already retired, different from today, and going forward in 1995, the actives take a portion of their pay and they support the retired teachers' health insurance, and then the other taxpayers are supplementing that. Now in Illinois, there's no tax on retired income.
Correct.
So in fairness, others have been supporting them, taxpayers as well as active teachers. So I do believe that you have a stake in it, because for those individuals who are making sure that they have health insurance, and they have a stake in getting this issue resolved. So it seems a little odd that you don't believe that you all have a stake in this process and that you all would come up with a solution.
I do have a witness slip from the State Universities Annuitants Association. They are neutral on the bill. So, Senator Rowland, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, follow-up question, maybe comment. Sir, let's suppose hypothetically we weren't even dealing with pension reform and there was a move to remove retiree health benefits. Is there something in the Constitution that you can point to where you would sue on the basis of removal of those retiree health benefits?
I think it would be a much more difficult fight than it would be if it was just pensions.
So
I'm not a legal scholar. I couldn't do it, no.
Yeah, to my knowledge, there's no language in the Constitution that protects that. So earlier it was, the indication was made that there would be some cause of action based on constitutionality. And you really don't have to, I mean, people revert back to, I am a lawyer, but people revert back to whether or not they're a lawyer. And and I invite everybody in this room to just take some time and just look at just the plain language of our state constitution, because it's not very complicated language. It's very explicit, a very explicit protection for retiree health care benefits that explicitly says it's a contractual relationship that shall not be diminished.
Correct.
And it does not say the same thing about health care benefits.
I think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the notion that comparing two bills and saying, well, people may sue either bill, and so they're basically at the same risk, is garbage, essentially, because it doesn't take a lawyer to look at the English language and look at explicit language in the Constitution that protects pension benefits as a contractual relationship. And it really, I mean, I invite everybody to just, journalists included, to take some time and read the English language in the Constitution, and it may lend some information to folks to be able to distinguish between the constitutionality of the competing bills that are in the General Assembly. It really doesn't take 3 years of law school to figure that out.
Sir, I appreciate that fact. I have read that part of the Constitution, and I understand where you're coming from. I think the part that worries us the most is the forced choice. That, it may not be in the Constitution specifically about insurance, it isn't. But the fact you almost have a gun to your head on the choices, that I think is the part that bothers us the most.
And I appreciate the argument on morality and notwithstanding the fact that I support this bill, I wish we as government had been more responsible historically over the past decades, past few decades, but we were not. And as a result, as Senator Claiborne pointed out, you as retirees, you do have something at stake, and it's the solvency of the pension funds, the respective pension funds. So I do believe you. Not only that, it's the impact of the pension payment on our ability to function as a government, and as retirees, to the extent that you still live in the state, the other services that you may rely upon are impacted upon by whether or not we do something about this. So you do on several fronts have something at stake if we sit back and do nothing.
My choice of words was poor on that.
No, and I'm not. It's not a criticism. It's not a criticism of you or your organization. I do believe that you do. I mean, you do have a moral argument, against it, which is distinguishable from a legal argument.
And Mr. Pinkerton, if it's any comfort to you, we've had a rash of people in committee this year who admit to being neither lawyers nor legal scholars, offering far more forceful and conclusive legal conclusions than you have. So you're in fine company. There being no further discussion, the roll is open. Madam Clerk, if you could complete the roll call. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Murphy. I thought you were tired. Senator Murphy.
I'm getting there, but I'm not there yet. Thank you. So and forgive me if you ran through these. My understanding is the projected savings on the bill that passed the House are about $140 billion in future liabilities and about $30 billion off of the $100 billion backlog. And your bill here is what?
With all due respect to the amendment that was put on in the Senate, or in the House, on Senate Bill 1, it's 140 or 0 if it's found to be unconstitutional. So
right, of course. We just found out yours is going to be challenged too, so I guess that premise applies to both, although not equally.
That's my second point.
Assuming it's found to be constitutional. It's $140 billion in future liabilities and $30 billion off of the $100 billion backlog or debt, whatever, shortfall. Is that accurate, that House bill? Have you guys run those numbers?
I think it's $29 billion in unfunded reduction, but we haven't the numbers on those yet.
Okay. And your numbers are what off of the future liability and what off of the unfunded liability?
Well, since there's a choice, there's a range. So we would have between 45 billion and, between 45 billion and 51 billion in savings over the next 30 years, depending on which percentage. That's the range, no lower than. And then the unfunded liability also is a range between 8.5 to 15.7. So it would depend on, again, on those are the ranges. Our best guess, though, assuming 50% take the deal, is 11.5 billion reduction in unfunded liability,
And
which, as I said before, is just an amount that immediately comes down, and then you pay off the rest of it. In our case, the same funding schedule we have in the current law right now, 90% funded by 2045.
The sponsor of the bill that passed the House indicated that he had confidence that at least four judges on the Supreme Court would find his bill constitutional. How many judges are you willing to put out on your bill?
Yeah. Well, that's obviously a prediction. I'm not on the Supreme Court. I don't know what the court would do. I do know, however, that I've read the 77, I think, page law review article about the constitutionality of what the pension clause means, and this is by far a much more logical argument if you want to defend its constitutionality, which is why, if you only have a 10% chance of being found constitutional, you can't ring up those savings, right, that are found in that amendment on Senate Bill 1. And the problem is, I reiterate, you wait another year, then and if it's thrown out, you lose the year, and you have to come back and pass a new law, and there'll be another lawsuit to delay it.
Let's assume.
So that's why I really think we're much less risky to go with this approach. And get to the same, virtually the same outcome in 2045. You don't save as much money along the way. I admit that. We only save next year $850 million if we pass this.
Let's assume that the unfortunate occurs and there is a suit to challenge your bill. And let's say specifically it's the Retired Teachers Association that does it. You referenced during testimony that there is a severability clause, and this is a very narrow piece of your bill. Going back to that math, because I think there's been a general sense around this building that it would be inappropriate to take savings from a pension plan passed this year in the 2014 budget that's July 1 of this year. Do you feel that it would be appropriate to take any amount of the $850 million savings in the 2014 budget? And if your bill were to pass, would you plan to do so?
Before we answer that question, Senator Staines would like leave to be recorded as voting aye. If there's no objection, you'll be so recorded. President Cullerton.
Senator, the schedule in this bill contemplates the systems. It has an immediate effective date. The systems have to get ready to operate this election. There's like 700,000 people affected by this. There's I think a period of time, maybe 4 months of opportunity for people to decide what choice they're going to have, and then by basically June 1st of next year, that's when we start getting the savings. That's why I say fiscal year 15. Presumably there would be lawsuits, if there are any, immediately during that time, and that would be when the legal issues would be determined.
This bill keeps the 1995 ramp in place, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that was a ramp that some who were involved with at the time said it was supposed to be revisited on a regular basis thereafter, and hasn't really. And there's been much criticism about the ramp. Why, given all of that, would we keep the ramp in place right now?
The criticism of the ramp was the first 15 years it was underfunded. That's what the problem was, and we added to the unfunded liability. It was passed, I think, in 1995, and I was here, and that's what the criticism was. And then it started to skyrocket, and that's one of the reasons why we have to pay so much money into the pension system.
But the rating agencies don't want us to keep this ramp, do they? My understanding is the rating agencies
want us to have a plan in place that's constitutional to get us to be funded as quickly as we can, as high as we can. So
this one goes to 90%,
which is actuarially very justifiable.
And the House bill that passed goes to 100%.
Yeah,
the rating agencies would prefer we go to 100%. Is that fair?
I doubt that would be a major factor. I really do. I think
that's a separate question. I mean, would they prefer it?
I mean, we could run the numbers to see what it would take to get to 100. It's a very a minor point in the big picture. What they're really concerned about is making sure something's constitutional and something passes.
They also want significant savings, though, correct?
$47 billion, $46 billion. I hope they think that's significant savings.
And that kind of leads to an interesting back and forth that went on here with a few of the members and witnesses and yourself, and that's the concept of solving this problem going forward, not having to deal with it again. Do you envision a scenario where we would need to pass future legislation in the next 5 years to address the pension situation if this bill became law?
Well, there's going to be bills put in that affect people's benefits that people can put in the next 5 years.
If we pass this, and my perception has been the impetus for getting this far on pension reform is this growing percentage of our budget that the pension payment takes. The idea, and you referenced 850 million of pressure off of our budget because of this. If in fact we were to do this, you feel like we would not be back in budget pressure due to growing pension payments
Senator,
within the next 5-10 years?
if you believe in the pension provision, and you believe as I do what it means, this is the only way around it, and we've got to pass this solution as quickly as possible.
But what if it doesn't do what if it doesn't solve the problem?
We have a constitution that says that arguably that we can't do anything else but this.
So theoretically, if it became 50% of our, if we did this, but somewhere down the road, the pension payment became 50% of our GRF budget, we would have to, under what you just said, pay the full 50%.
Senator, this is a very good point. This is all based on presumptions as to what's going to happen in the next 30 years. We assume that there's going to be a certain rate of return from these pension investments. We assume, in the case of the teachers, there's going to be a 6% pay raise for the teachers every year for 30 years, for example. We don't know how long people are going to live. There's all these things that can change between now and, but we do have, I can give you a projection as to what percentage of the state's budget this pension system would take. It'll be reduced. It'll be reduced. Right now it's about 20. It'll come down, okay, below 20. It depends on what the state budget is in the future, in the next 30 years. So those all are variables. But if you believe, as I do, that this provision in the Constitution is what forces us to kind of be creative and come up with this type of a solution, there's only a certain amount of money that you can save, and we're trying to save as much as we can.
And then finally, that 850 billion worth of pressure. Million. Thank you. And I don't want to play favorites. I asked Senator Brady this when he was here, and I'll ask you. That would increase the likelihood that we could have the tax increase go back down as it's scheduled to do. Is that fair?
That's a very good point, because that issue will be before us. As you know, by operation of law, the income tax goes back down, the personal income tax rate to 3.75. At the same time, we would be saving this $850 million, would start in that same fiscal year. So that's true.
And just in closing, and just a remark, and I want to reiterate what I said when your version of Senate Bill 1 was here before, that I appreciate your efforts in this regard and your work on this issue, and you're reaching out to the union leaders, and they're reaching back. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of a Groundhog Day component to this, because I just don't think this solves the problem and saves enough money, and I think it invites us to have to be back here far too soon to have to face this again. The House bill isn't perfect. Nobody's happy about it. But the reality is it passed that chamber. It has broad support in our caucus, and the governor has said he didn't sign it. And I would just encourage you to reconsider your opposition to that bill so we can put this behind us.
Well, actually, Senator, I'm the sponsor of that bill. And I voted for Senator Biss's bill. We're trying to get 30 votes here. That bill fell short. That's another problem that we haven't talked about.
Well, you know what? There are ways that things work around here, and sometimes they work a little better with a little elbow grease when that's applied.
Well, maybe you can change your mind on this bill. Never know. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Senator Ryder had indicated that he wanted to discuss a possible amendment. And if I understand what the amendment was, that if the way this bill is drafted, we have anybody who takes the deal is allowed to file a lawsuit compelling their systems to pay the amount that's mandated. That would be, there's 700,000 people that are potential plaintiffs if they all took this deal. If they don't, you had suggested that maybe the General Assembly would not have to pay anything into the system? Maybe I can understand what your amendment would be.
The amendment that I'm suggesting is very simple. It says that you would say that in any year that the General Assembly and the governor fail to pay the actuarially determined amount, that people in the systems who are paying their individual contributions now would have their contribution reduced by the same exact percentage.
Wouldn't that hurt the pension system?
Not if you make your payment.
But
It'd be
you're-
great. Actually, that's the best way to guarantee the payment.
So, but if for some reason they didn't sue, because our goal here is to compel them to make the payment. If they didn't,
Compel
you're-
them, meaning
the
you.
systems.
Compel no, I'm talking about compelling the systems can't make the payment. The General Assembly and the governor. I'm talking about the best way to ensure that the General Assembly and the governor appropriate the amount that the actuaries say is needed in order to fully fund the system is to make sure that the General Assembly and the governor
Okay.
understand
Yeah.
that there is a heavy, heavy price to pay on the other side to not do that.
Because you're concerned that if there's a lawsuit, a successful lawsuit, compelling the General Assembly to pay the money, that we could still not do that?
I'm just making sure that the payment gets made, and rather than going through 2 steps of court, this is far more direct and far easier. It's easier, and it's easier for all the members of these associations and labor unions who testified to understand, because their view, Mr. President, is that we paid ours in,
Yeah.
and the General Assembly hasn't done their job. So the response, the appropriate response, is for the General Assembly and the governor to say, you know what, you're right. If we don't do our job,
Yeah.
you don't have to do yours.
Well, you and I are on the same page here in terms of accomplishing the goal. We want to make sure that we get the money into the system. But your amendment seems to offer a possibility that if for some reason the General Assembly didn't appropriate the money, even though we're ordered to by a court, that if other people then don't pay, it seems like the actual pension system would actually have less money in it.
The pension payment this year is it $8 billion? And the General Revenue Fund, we're going to take in 34, 35? Under what scenario could we not make the pension payment? How high would the pension payment have to go before we literally couldn't make the payment? That's impossible. That's not going to happen. So if you really want to make the members of these associations and labor unions confident and kind of resolve the years of mistrust that's been built, put that in the bill.
But the employee contributions that you would withhold, that has nothing to do with the budget.
It has something to do with the system, though.
Okay?
Right.
I just have no idea why you'd want to jeopardize the pension
I don't. I want to
systems.
ensure that you don't do what the Democrats did in fiscal year 2006 and 2007 and approve a $2.3 billion diversion from the funds. That's what you guys did. And what I'm saying is the best way to make sure that you're not tempted to do that again, even with all the General Revenue Fund pressures we have, is to put the system at stake.
Yeah, I agree with you. We want to make sure that this language in here gives, as part of the deal with the unions, that we are compelled to have to make this payment, and if for some reason we didn't, someone could sue, many people could sue, and compel us to do so.
I don't want the Illinois Retired Teachers Association to have to burn their $100,000 on an overpriced lawyer to get the systems to do something that they should have to do
Well,
anyway.
first of
No
all, I don't
offense,
think
sir.
Senator Murphy appreciates
why
the
don't we just-
reference.
Why don't we just kind of when, you know, there's some people, not me, have referred to this amendment as the put up or shut up amendment. You know what? If you're serious about funding the systems, by golly, then here's your opportunity.
Well, I want to work with you, because if you think that this is the only thing in this bill that you don't like anymore,
No, there's plenty of other things that I don't like, but the biggest, the COGFA's told us that over 40% of the unfunded liability that's accrued since 1995 has been because a majority of the General Assembly and governors haven't put in what the actuaries said they needed to put in.
You're absolutely
Yet
right.
here we are devising a solution that touches on that problem but doesn't go right at that problem. My amendment goes right at that problem.
okay, well, I know that you didn't vote for Senator Biss's bill, and you've indicated you don't like this bill, so I'm open to hearing what kind of a bill.
You'll have our amendment this afternoon.
But would that amendment be enough to make you want to vote for
I
this?
already made the commitment that if you put my amendment on, I'll vote for your bill.
Okay. But you've heard my concern about the
It's your decision whether to
about
put the amendment on the bill.
effectiveness of your amendment.
I think it'd be very effective, and
But it could result
and
in
if you're serious
actually
about funding the
underfunding
pension
the
system
pension
for these
system.
people, I think that
But
it'll
it-
go on the bill.
But it could result, under very unusual circumstances, of actually underfunding the pension system.
If you can devise a scenario in which you can't find the money in a $35 billion general revenue fund for an $8 billion payment, then I'm willing to listen.
Thank you. There being no further discussion, Madam Clerk, would you please conclude the roll call?
Senator Severson. Senator Ryder. Senator Luchtefeld. Senator Murphy. Senator Rodeno. Senator Raul. Senator Munoz. Senator Link. Senator Lightford. President Cullerton. Senator Claiborne. Senator Silverstein. Mr. Chairman.
Aye. On that question, there are 9 voting aye, 5 voting no, and the bill will be so reported. Oh, please add Senator Munoz wants to vote aye. Let's correct that roll call. There are 10 voting aye, 5 voting no, and the bill will be so reported.
The Illinois Channel's coverage of legislative issues is underwritten in part by AARP Illinois.